Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fairness Protocol, episode 3 of Fairness Protocol. In this episode, we're going to go over the fundamentals of Bitcoin and talk about Bitcoin. Honestly, the rest of it, whatever remains of Bitcoin that we haven't spoken about, we're going to cover in this episode. Okay, so let's talk about it, starting with one question that is very common as well. So the question is this: as we talked about in the previous session, the difficulty of the network is so high that one cannot simply mine it with a simple CPU. Okay, so the mining process has been controlled by certain mining pools, as we said, thus becoming more centralized. Okay, but if governments make mining illegal and detain all who mine it, then do we go back in time, sort of, and can we mine with CPUs again or not? How does that work? This is a question that that's been asked, and I've seen a lot of people talk about it as well. So let's talk about it. First things first, governments and corporations can make things hard, as we all know, right? But do they have complete control? No, not everything is within their control. Perhaps big firms and extremely high energy consumption can be pinpointed and located for detainment. Maybe the mining pools can be identified, okay? However, when decentralized mining pools become a thing, with certain techniques, you can hide and mask the IP of every device connected to that pool, making it unrealistic for anyone to find you. It's practically impossible to do that. There's also the possibility that someone has a firm in a very remote location, and if the IP is masked, nobody can locate them realistically, right? Moreover, it's also highly unlikely for governments to take such drastic actions toward miners. But if they do, yes, the difficulty of the network becomes softer and lower, and also the hash rate drops alongside the difficulty, of course, and it allows mining with simple CPUs once again, okay? However, Bitcoin would become extremely vulnerable to hacks and other security breaches once that happens, okay? Causing the price to plummet. But this is a scenario that is it's not likely to happen anytime soon, at least, right? So, if this improbable event were to occur, while we have Bitcoin at like 61K, like $61,000, it would weaken its security measures significantly, okay, making the 51% attacks and similar actions much easier. Yet the possibility is highly improbable. Like, we shouldn't even be talking about this. Even if governments wanted to shut down the World Wide Web, it would be easier for them than detaining and dismissing all existing miners. That's like, if I were to say how improbable it is, that's a very good example. If such an event were to happen, it would also affect transaction speeds and block mining temporarily, okay? Since miners would have significantly less processing power due to the high difficulty, transaction speeds would be like extremely lower for the first 2 weeks, okay, until the difficulty readjustment, of course. In a recent incident, actually, when both the internet and electricity went down in Iran, Bitcoin's hash rate dropped by like 7 to 12%. This shows that the number of miners in Iran has an impact on the speed of block mining, right? Any changes that occur during the like 2 week period between difficulty readjustments, causing the difficulty to increase or decrease exponentially, will result in extremely slow or fast operations until the next difficulty readjustment. Okay, we've talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into details on this. However, after the next difficulty readjustment, the difficulty will lower or raise accordingly, right? And mining and transaction speeds will return to normal. So, in very short words, like if I were to summarize it, yes, if a catastrophe happens and and a lot of mining pools are shut down and a lot of miners are detained, then yes, we can go back to CPU mining. But such an event is very, very improbable, okay? So let's talk about another question, which is what is a decentralized mining pool and how will they be in the future? So let's talk about that. Mining pools are systems where individuals and miners from different locations in the world combine their processing power to create a collectively significant processing power, right? It's basically like a lot of computers join their forces to become a very big computer, okay? That's basically a very simple way of putting it. But the system designates person A to work on, for example, task X until Y, right? And the person B is to work on task Y until Z, right? Do you get what I'm meaning? Like it's a basically a very wide network of computers or nodes that become something like a big computer that's called a mining pool. Okay, and through this organized process, they conduct trials and error until one of the miners succeeds. Okay, it is as if the pool itself wins, right? It wins a block, like it actually wins, right? And then the pool distributes the acquired reward among the participants, right? So a few years ago, it was a simple matter of equally dividing the prize among everyone, right? However, nowadays, some pools pay miners an hourly fee similar to retail workers, while others introduce creative games. For example, you may be winning the X token, but the prize you receive would be in the form of a Y token, for example, right? Some pools even offer greater rewards for the miner who successfully mines a pool. So it differs really. Like a lot of other like different systems have been created creatively for this cause alone. But how do decentralized pools work? In decentralized mining pools, you do not surrender your processing power to an individual, right? Instead, you contribute it to a network of nodes that are also decentralized and have their own nodes. Like they're basically different computers or different network of computers that work as a node, and then you contribute to that, like you contribute together, right? Like it's a network of networks basically, right? This arrangement ensures that the system has no control over the reward itself, basically. People who contribute their processing power to such pools are not entrusting their power to a person, a single individual, right? But rather to a decentralized mechanism. This concept is already being implemented, by the way, and there are decentralized pools correctly available. A simple Google search will get you there. But in the coming years, decentralized mining pools will probably become even more prominent and prevalent, right? So definitely take like it. Definitely try to remember this conversation because these decentralized mining pools are going to be a huge thing in the future, hopefully. So I understand that in the Persian like a version of fairness protocol, there was a question asked, and I was specifically very interested in talking about that because, well, you'll see because it's a very interesting matter. So the question was back then that a person had read in an article that when Ethereum 2 came out, or like it didn't happen back then, but when Ethereum 2 comes out as a like a standalone network, Polygon will and other things like Polygon, right, will be terminated. Other layer 2 blockchains basically. How is that? That was a question. Okay, so here's the answer to that question. First of all, I want to say that this question will be answered probably in our seventh or eighth episode, where we talk about when we reach basically a point that you'll understand how like everything related to that works. However, I also wanted to provide a brief answer, but even before that, let me just recite a quote, okay, that says, the essence of Bitcoin is the ability to operate decentralized without having to trust. You don't trust other nodes, you don't trust other miners, and you don't trust other people that are making transactions. This quote is by Andrea Santopoulos, okay? This code basically captures a sense of the fairness protocol. Okay, once you understand this, your perspective on cryptocurrencies will also be different. Some people view the crypto field as technologists, like while others view it as a lens of fairness, basically. The thing is, cryptocurrency is moving toward fairness, actually, not just technology. Although technology is a big, significant part of it, but yeah, as I said, it's moving toward fairness, hence the name Fairness Protocol, right? So, more about the question, let's talk about that. Networks like Matic or Binance Smart Chain have copied Ethereum's formula on a centralized platform, making it easier for us to use them and perform transactions. Like for example, Binance Smart Chain it's a really easy to work on BSC or Binance Smart Chain basically. However, these are fleeting pleasures, let's call it, okay? They will disappear as quickly as they appeared and will soon become useless, to be honest. It is not advisable to build anything on their foundation, okay? You may ask, is this because they're centralized that you will say that they will be rendered useless? And to answer that, I will present two outlooks on this subject. My personal outlook and the outlook of those who don't share the same ideas as I do, right? So personally, I believe that decentralization is the sole concept of a currency, right? If you remove decentralization from a currency, it will not be secure or worthwhile, honestly, whether for investing or transacting, okay? In the short term, few people accept my perspective, right? When you want to transfer your Tether, you will do so through Tether TRC, right? However, we're here to provide long-term outlooks for like astute businessmen, or let's call it that. On the other hand, the opposing outlook states that it doesn't bother them if a token or system is centralized, right? As long as it doesn't affect them personally. So those who use Binance or PancakeSwap, for example, and make money through them don't care if they're like centralized or not. I don't care about Bitcoin or whatever Satoshi said it is cash, like whatever Satoshi believed is cash, but it's now like becoming a store of value, right? So what matters is that if I can use it, so can people from Africa, Australia, and Iran, okay, without needing to explain it to or justify it to anyone. Okay, so that's decentralization. These users are utilizing cryptocurrencies because they lack the necessary knowledge to determine their value and safety. And governments are also unsure how to regulate these platforms. Binance and similar centralized systems claim to be decentralized, preventing governments from regulating or setting rules for them. Okay. However, over time, as we see, like on the news, on the headlines, okay, um, over time, boundaries and rules will be established, right? It's inevitable, right? In the long term, my perspective will prove to be correct, okay? However, in the short term, it doesn't really matter. Like, if you want to take action, it will be useful to you, but if you want to examine their urgency, principles, and long term implications, then you should probably adopt my perspective. Ultimately, though, it all depends on your insight and outlook. Now let's talk about the introduction and the transaction section of the Bitcoin white paper as well, because it's really interesting and it's actually like one of the core concepts of cryptocurrencies, of course, because like transaction is basically half of cryptocurrencies, right? So commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments, right? While the system works well enough for most transactions that we do like on a regular basis, it still suffers from the inherent weakness of this trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes, right? The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practical transaction size and cutting off the possibility for like small casual transactions. Okay, there's also a broader cost in the loss of ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services, right? With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads, right? Merchants must be wary of their customers, hassling them for more information as they would otherwise need, right? We've always been like staying by the KYC thing. It's not a like a it's not the most um it's not the most obnoxious thing, to be honest, but it's also kind of obnoxious, right? Anyway, a certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable, right? This cost and payments, uncertain, like it makes like this is problems. This like percentage of fraud, okay, can be avoided by with a person, right, by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists to make payments over a communications channel without a trusted party, right? What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, okay, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. That's exactly what cryptocurrencies do. Transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. In this paper, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer to peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of the chronological order of transactions. The system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes, which is basically the reverse of the exact opposite of the 51% attack, right? Now, we define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by like digitally signing a hash of the previous transaction and the public key of the next owner, and adding this to the end of the chain. A payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership. The problem, of course, is that the payee can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. A common solution is to introduce a trusted central authority or mint that checks every transaction for double spending, right? After each transaction, the coins must be returned to the mint to issue a new coin. And only coins issued directly from the mint are trusted not to be double spent, basically, right? But the problem with this solution is that the fate of the entire money system depends on the company running the mint. With every transaction having to go through them, it's just a mess, just like our banking systems and just like our current monetary system. Now we need a way for the payee to know that the previous owners did not sign any earlier transactions. For our purposes, the earlier transaction is the one that counts. So we don't care about later attempts to double spend, okay? The only way to confirm the absence of a transaction is to be aware of all transactions, okay? In the mint based model, the mint was aware of all transactions and decided which arrived first. To accomplish this, without a trusted party, transactions must be publicly announced. And we need a system for participants to agree on a single history of the order in which they were received, okay? The payee needs proof that at the time of each transaction, the majority of nodes agreed that it was first received. Now, how a transaction works in Bitcoin is similar to a check. It has an address, and you want to send the same check to another address, right? And next to it, you have a sign, something you apply to the check so it's verified. Another example is this: you have a note and you sign it. When you sign the said note, it means that you read it, or it's been read by you, basically, It can also be checked by other people so that they know you as a credible person who has done the checking, basically, right? It can be done by a third party. You might think a transaction means transferring money, and well, it's that. It is that, but it's not just that, okay? The transaction is a changing or recording of information. It's not just limited to money and finance. Okay, maybe in the case of Bitcoin, the transfer or the verification of a transfer only devolves into just verification of the said money transfer in the blockchain. But in Ethereum, the transaction can be done by something such as liking someone else's tweet, right? Or by just receiving a loan from an exchange, or basically anything else that is done by a smart contract. Okay, so basically, a transaction is not limited to only transferring money. These transactions are a series of notes. When you want to take a loan, you go to the place you want to take a loan from and you write down about yourself and how you want to take that loan and like some information, right? And like when you're going to return it. Next to various other things, right? And at the end, you sign the note, and that's it, right? The said note with your sign will be verified by some other people before ultimately being put into action. In cryptocurrency, everything is a note, right? Just like the example that I provided, everything is just like that. A message containing information and content which will be signed at the end. But the key difference is that in the physical world, each person's sign will be different depending on the strength of your fingers, the force you put on the pen, and the angle of the pen, basically, right? As well as the innate shape of the pen or something. But in the cyber world, you can't possibly have a unique sign um, in that way, since even if you draw the most complex sign you can, a copy and paste of it will be just a similar thing compared to the sign, the original sign, right? So the signs in the cyber world had to differ, and that difference came in the form of the sign, right? Signs in digital world consist of a series of numbers, which is cryptographic as well. So it's not, you can't just copy and paste it everywhere, and it's more complex than that. All right, now enough about the signs. Let's talk about public and private keys and how they work. Public key cryptography, or symmetric cryptography as it's also known, is an encryption model that uses two keys. The first of these keys is the public key, and anyone can use it to encrypt messages intended for the owner of the second key, the private key, basically. This method of encryption is widely used across the internet and the other digital technologies for secure communication, such as emails and online banking transactions, right? Private key cryptography, also known as symmetric cryptography, uses only one key. In this method, both the sender and the receiver use the same exact secret key to encrypt and decrypt messages. This type of encryption is often faster and more efficient than the public key cryptography, but it's more vulnerable to attacks by hackers and by basically the bad people, right? Digital signatures are an important feature of public key cryptography. They are used to verify the authenticity of a digital document or message. A digital signature is created using the sender's private key and is attached to the digital document or message. So if you create a document with the number 1 on it, it has the public key of 1. And it can only be signed by the user who has the private key to that public key, meaning everyone can see the public key, but not everyone can verify it. The recipient can then use the public key of the sender to verify that the digital signature was indeed created by that specific sender. Digital signatures are used to ensure the integrity, authenticity, and non-repudiation of digital documents. Now, towards our next subject, there's a term I should explain actually, and that term and that's the term nonce. It's different in Bitcoin and Ethereum, but in Bitcoin, nonce is also called a sequence, which means that if you create a document called B with the address A and sign it with C, if someone creates a document with the address D and replicates the sign C, they can replicate the same transaction in document B. Okay, and the sign gets verified because it's deterministic. If you give the same document, you will receive the same key you used before. Does that make sense? You should probably go through that again, but I was actually focusing a lot on not messing it up, but that's how it works. An example, okay, maybe that helps you. An example is that I'm sending 10 bitcoins to a person named X. The 10 bitcoins are the document, right? And it has my address and my signature. And now, if someone called Y inputs the same document with the same sign, they can do the same transaction of 10 bitcoins again from my wallet to X's wallet. Because of this, there's a term called sequence in Bitcoin, which means every transaction has its own unique number as well. It counts a series of transactions I have done. So if I do my transaction first, it goes with the number one, and the next transaction I make will turn that number into two, thus changing the document internally, preventing the problem addressed earlier. And that number is called a nonce. Now the problem here is that some person can basically create a 17th nonce in an exchange, for example, with your address, right? And when you do 69 transactions, your wallet will be empty because the 17th transactions has already been the 17th transaction, my apologies, has already been conducted. But this attack or hack or whatever you call it, this is not practically going to happen to you because you don't want to share your private key and public key with someone at the same time, right? Basically, the name suggests like private key. The name suggests that you have to keep your key private and you don't give it away to anyone so that they can't empty your wallet like that, right? Well, like the question here is that is there any way to know if a transaction has been predetermined with our for our public and private key? And the simple, quick answer to that is no. There's no way to know if there has been a transaction predetermined for your keys because that information is not stored in the online space. It is completely off the line and off the online world and the blockchains. You can make a wallet right now without having any access to the internet because your private key is determined from a number between 1 and 2 raised to the power of 256, which is an enormously large number, right? For instance, in Ethereum, your private key is the following example: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, for example. You can replace the numbers and generate your own private key. With that private key, you can generate your address and your public key without any hardware whatsoever. These pieces of data aren't stored on the blockchain. Public keys and such are randomly generated number. But going back to the original question, if a scammer is smart enough, they won't store that data anywhere either. Well, they do actually, but later on, right? They will use it to take your money through predetermined transactions and such. So they will need to store it somewhere online later, but not like initially, okay? That's what I meant. Another way you can get scammed is if the scammers use simple and basic private keys, such as 1 to 9, or some very straightforward keys, right? They plant bots on these keys since many people have that key and pour some money in it, basically. It's just a wallet, right? For example, if you see that the key one has around $10,000 in it, and when you can, like when you want to transfer or use Ethereum as a transaction fee, the planted bots will empty your wallet completely in seconds, right? Now you might ask, is it possible that people in different places in the world generate the same private key together? And to that, I should say yes, the chance is there, but the numbers are so big and random that it has never happened and it probably will never happen since the chances are extremely low. But if this game of chances become big enough, no chances will be involved. Let me explain that. There is something called the observable universe, right? The observable universe is a part of the universe that the light has reached after the Big Bang, right? The entirety of the world we see, the cosmos, the galaxies, the stars, and everything else in the observable universe, the chance of 1 in 2 raised by the power of 256 means that you can choose a single atom in the entirety of the observable universe, right? So now, what is the chance that two people choose the same atom? It's gonna be like it's ridiculous. It's not even like let's not even talk about it. The chances are too low, right? So right now, who has the largest mega computers in the world? It's probably either Google or IBM. And in today's technology, the mega computer that can calculate and process those numbers has to be much bigger in size than what we have right now. If we covered the entire surface of the Earth with the S9J mining machine, for someone to hack your private key using that much processing power, it would take nearly 10 raised to the power of 60 years to do it. And the entire time that the Earth has existed is nearly 10 raised to the power of 9 years. That is how huge the numbers in this equation are. So do not even worry about that. All right, so the next part that we should talk about is the network and incentive part of the Bitcoin white paper. Now, the thing is that proof of work and timestamp servers were discussed in detail in the previous episode, in the previous session. So we'll skip these two parts. But following the proof of work part is the network part. And the steps to run the network are as follows. Okay, let's talk about it. New transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects new transactions into a block. Each node then works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block, and when a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes. Nodes accept the block only if all transactions in it are valid and not already spent. And then nodes express their acceptance of the block by working on creating the next block in the chain, using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. Nodes always consider the longest chain to be the correct one and will keep working on extending it. If two nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously, some nodes may receive one or the other one first, right? In that case, they work on the first one they received, but save the other branch in case it becomes longer. The tie will be broken when the next proof of work is found and one branch becomes longer, right? The nodes that were working on the other branch will then switch on the to the longer one, basically. Hence, it becomes the main chain, right? New transaction broadcasts do not necessarily need to reach all nodes. As long as they reach many nodes, they will get into a block before long. Broadcasts are also tolerant of dropped messages. So if a node does not receive a block, it will request it when it receives the next block and realizes that it missed one. So by convention, the first transaction in a block is a special transaction that starts a new coin owned by the creator of the block. This adds an incentive for nodes to support the network and provide a way to initially distribute coins into circulation, since there is no centralized authority to issue them, basically. The steady addition of constant amounts of new coins is analogous to gold miners expending resources to add gold to circulation, right? In our case, it is the CPU time and electricity that is expanded. The incentive can also be funded with transaction fees. If the output value of a transaction is less than its input value, the difference is a transaction fee that is added to the incentive value of the block containing the transaction. Once a predetermined number of coins have entered circulation, the incentive can transition entirely to transaction fees and be completely inflation free. The incentive may help encourage nodes to stay honest. So, if a greedy attacker, for example, is able to assemble more CPU power than all the other honest nodes, he would have to choose between using it to defraud people by stealing back his payments or using it to, well, generate new coins. He ought to find it more profitable to play by the rules, right? So, such rules that favor him with more new coins than everyone else combined, basically, right? Than to undermine the system and the validity of his own wealth. So this mechanism here may sound complex, but it's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? It's how Bitcoin has its value, like, and it's keeping its value to this very day, and how it's basically working, all right? But I want to talk about consensus mechanism as well and how it works. I want to talk about that as well because I feel like it's necessary to understand how consensus mechanism work before we basically move over from the fundamentals of cryptocurrency. In cryptocurrency, consensus refers to general agreement between individuals on a set subject, right? It is a part of the proof of work or proof of stake mechanism. In the context of blockchain, though, consensus mechanism involves the competitive mining process, basically, right? Where participants race to add information to the block. This mechanism also includes how nodes are connected and how information is communicated and broadcasted, and how transactions are executed. All these aspects together form the consensus mechanism. In simple terms, a consensus mechanism in blockchain validates and authenticates transactions. So the next time you basically do any transactions on the blockchain, it's the consensus mechanism that takes care of it and everything related to it, right? So it lists all valid transactions of a coin in a blockchain to establish trust among traders. Various currencies, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, utilize the system for security purposes. Bitcoin, for instance, employs the Satoshi algorithm, and proof of work is a component of this overall mechanism. A concise explanation of the consensus mechanism is provided by Andreas Santopoulos as rules without rulers, right? Indicating that there is a defined set of rules through which individuals reach a mutual agreement, right? Additionally, there are different types of a consensus mechanism algorithms that it's actually expanding as well. Like every day, we hear new consensus mechanisms being used and utilized on different blockchains, and each of them really have their different purposes uh, and basically employing each one for each single blockchain out there has its own reasons, right? For example, I can say that proof of work is a commonly used consensus mechanism and consensus algorithm in popular cryptocurrency networks like Bitcoin, right? It requires participants to demonstrate that the work they have done qualifies them to add new transactions to the blockchain, hence the name proof of work. However, Bitcoin mining consumes substantial energy and involves long processing times. Proof of stake is another widely adopted consensus mechanism that has emerged as a low cost and low energy alternative to proof of work. It assigns the responsibility of maintaining the public ledger to participants based on the number of virtual currencies that they hold. However, this approach incentivizes hoarding rather than spending, right? Because you want to have your assets staked so you can participate in expanding the network, right? However, so because of that, Because like while proof of work or POW and proof of stake or POS are the most prevalent consensus mechanisms in the blockchain space, there are also other algorithms out there such as proof of capacity that allows nodes to share memory space on the blockchain network. So nodes with more memory or hard disk space are granted more rights in maintaining the public ledger. Or proof of activity is another one that is a hybrid consensus mechanism that combines the aspects of both proof of work and proof of stake. Or proof of burn requires transactors to send small amounts of cryptocurrency to inaccessible wallet addresses, effectively burning them out of existence. So as you can see, there are different consensus mechanisms, and like employing each one of them has their own reasons. Like maybe blockchains have different reasons for employing proof of stake because they want to be faster, or maybe they employ proof of work because they want it to be more decentralized than proof of stake is. So as I said, it really differs. It really varies from blockchain to blockchain, but that is what a consensus mechanism is, and that's how it works. Now, there's a question, especially in the proof of work area, that if a miner mines a block while it's empty, doesn't it make a systematic problem down the line for the blockchain if the set chain becomes the longest chain? So the answer to that question is yes, but someone has to be like insane to do such a deed. But I have said this before, and I'll say it again right now. You would understand much more about why it's like this. If you separate money and cryptocurrency from the blockchain, it will become worthless. You see, like people saying blockchain is something and crypto is something completely different. But with the information you have right now, you realize that the entire industry is built upon money, right? People work because there's money to be made, and people get up, get in their cars, and go to their workplace because there's money to be made. And the miner tries not to make mistakes in the process if he or she knows that there will be money. So there is no reason to mine a blockchain uh, without being incentivized, without being rewarded for it, right? Because of the same reason, basically, there's competition to begin with, and the network difficulty is so high. It will be more profitable for the miner when the block is full, containing transactions with more transaction fees. So it is because of the fact that people behave rationally toward money that the blockchain is up and running today. Honestly, that's the only reason. If for some godforsaken reason the entire human population goes insane, mining empty blocks will be the least of our problems. So you see, it's practically possible to do such a thing, like mine a block while it's empty. But it's just a waste of time and energy and electricity and everything, basically. So yes, it's in theory you can do that, but in practice you have to be kind of like insane to do so. All right, so to sum this episode up, I have to talk about something else, which is like in today's world, honestly, and with like the news that is coming out every day nowadays, it's actually a very valid question. This was actually asked in the Persian episode of Fairness Protocol as well, but somehow it's also very applicable in today's world, and like right now it's very applicable. So what is the question? The question is, which one of these scenarios will be the future of cryptocurrency? Do the governments restrict the crypto and pass legislation for their own profit? Or the crypto will reach its intended aim, becoming the decentralized, becoming so decentralized that the governments can't limit it at all? Or the third option, that the governments and the crypto go their own respective ways next to each other, like as if they coexist together, right? So let's talk about that quickly. So you see, the governments already know that they will and are experiencing losses due to crypto being the decentralized way it is. But at the same time, they're trying to do anything they can do to turn the tables on crypto. But how the world works is that the governments that have more money can buy and hire more miners and thus make more profit and mine more blocks. As you can see today, like China, even Iran, and some countries like Russia and everything. Like they have money and they allocate money for crypto mining and they earn money off of it. Okay. But apart from this, they're legislating this field to their heart's content. The U.S. legislates crypto at every corner because of the tax they receive on this, and the money it's making through the law system. But as Barwood says himself, the crypto and its field is the most centralized as it's been, um, and it and as and the most centralized it will ever be. Honestly, at some point it will turn around and start getting closer to its intended purposes and aims, and getting more and more decentralized, just like how Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned it to be, just like privacy coins nowadays, as you can see them today. Then the laws and legislations made for this field will be rendered useless, essentially, and the governments can't tax the miners or the users. The centralized networks and exchanges will be either gone forever or changed to decentralized at that point. And there isn't anything left to pass laws on by then, right? Now, a question presented is it possible to block the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem, or let's call it crypto system, right? Including the exchanges and transactions out of a country, out of a single country. And the answer is if it's the exchange wallet, then yes, okay? It can be completely blocked and neutralized. But if it is a case of decentralized currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum, then it's impossible because they cannot be blocked or stopped. There's another scenario that is, again, highly unlikely to happen, and that is when the US government gives out a list of addresses to certain exchanges in this country so that any transactions from and to those addresses either do not get placed in a block or do not become verified at all. If most of the mining pools undertake these laws and practices, there will be no transactions from or to these addresses. But then this will turn into a situation just like what happened in Nigeria. When Nigeria did something like this and banned crypto transactions in their country, peer to peer transactions skyrocketed. So ultimately, the decentralized coins and their transactions are untraceable. Maybe various countries pass legislations for the exchanges in their respective countries, so that the exchanges or the miners that exist in the host country have to obey the rules. But then again, that will make the profits plummet since the decentralized nature of this field will be affected. So it is only when people realize how this decentralization benefits them, how the whole system works, and how and then they can deduce fair and unfair projects from each other, that they will be free of these restrictions and limitations. You see, the reason that what the governments are doing right now will be disadvantageous for them in the long run, of course, can be explained by one example. If I live in Iran and if I use a VPN that works just fine, I won't go searching for different ways to connect to the internet, okay? But when VPNs are getting banned, and we saw that happen actually, right? I will search for different ways, get introduced to routers and DNS, just like it actually happened in China as well. Like we got introduced to V2Ray, VLS, and like Trojan services that work just like VPNs but better, right? And I will learn how to access internet in other ways, right? Likewise, it is when the centralized money system is lacking that people go search for alternative ways to transact and get introduced to things such as crypto and its inner workings. You see, that is the reason cryptocurrency actually exists today, because the money system was lacking and it wasn't as good as it should have been, right? So that's I think how and that's how Barbara thinks that the cryptocurrency environment or the crypto system is going to work in the future. But that was it for the Furnace Protocol episode 3, or basically session 3. Thank you guys for listening, and it's been an honor to do this and to be with you guys. And Happy investing and happy trading to all of you guys. I'll see you guys next time.